On my way to the shop the other day, I was kind of thinking about the good old days, like how we do. And it's kind of got sparked from anybody that's familiar with my graffiti from the 90s. Well, I can't say anybody, but it seems like a lot of people. So a lot of times when I post work from the 90s, I get comments like, "Oh, you got to bring that back," and I've heard that quite a bit here and there. So I never really wanted to bring it back because, well, not that I didn't want to. It was just I just was worried that like the energy wasn't going to be the same. I tend to overthink things, so that's what was going on. I was just overthinking it. Like I wasn't going to pull it off. It wasn't going to look the same. All this kind of shit. So I haven't really done the styles that I did in the 90s for probably close to 30 years. Like the late 90s, the stuff started evolving and I was doing some other shit. I don't really have photos of that stuff, but in the early or mid 90s, 94, 95, some of 96, I was doing a certain style, and I haven't really done that for that long. So anyway, long story short, just recently, the last time I painted, I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to pull out some of the old shit and give that a go. And so I did a piece and, I just went with the old letters. I didn't modify them at all. And I kind of tried to do a sort of old school type of fill in. It was a little more, I don't know. I don't know why I'm having trouble talking about this. It's just not coming out right. Anyway, so I did kind of like an old school fill in and I also tried to capture sort of the energy of how it used to be back then. It was like, I own a paint shop now. So like I can literally go in and just like pick any color I want and any color palette that I want. But in the 90s, it wasn't really like that. I mean, obviously you could go and buy whatever colors were available, but there was much, much less colors available. So, I mean, even in 94, like Krylon and Rusto didn't even have like a true purple. So, I mean, it was like very limited color palettes. You had maybe like a couple different shades of blue and maybe three. I think it was like Regal Blue, True Blue, and Baby Blue from Krylon. And then Rusto had some similar stuff. But this was before, I think it was called Painter's Touch came out and some other colors came out. But anyway, even then, you had a much more limited color palette. So I was thinking about it and I was like, anytime I go to paint nowadays, I can just go into my shop and I can stand in front of hundreds of colors and just figure out whatever I want. And at the same time, I find that a little difficult because there's just so many colors to choose from that it actually makes it a little harder. And back in the 90s, you just worked with what you had and you had like weird color combinations because there wasn't a lot, like I said, there wasn't a lot of colors available. So I was trying to capture that and I was like, I'm just going to paint with whatever I have in the garage. And so I put some colors together that I thought might look okay. And I did have to go to the shop to get a can of black because I didn't have any black and I wanted to go true old school with the black outline, black drop shadow, white inline or highlights as we used to call them. And so anyway, I did the piece and it came out okay. I was like moderately happy with it. And I was actually reluctant to post it because I was like, I don't feel like I really pulled it. But I posted it anyway. And like everybody, not everybody, but like the comment section went a little crazy. I think like this morning I checked, I think there was like 78 comments or something. And people seemed excited to see that. So, I mean, I'm assuming these are people that are familiar with my work from back then. And so anyway, that's why I was thinking about the quote, good old days. And it's, I try not to think about those old days and kind of reminisce in a way that makes me want to go back there. Like I do miss those days. But I don't want to be like, what was the guy's name in Napoleon Dynamite, like Uncle Rico, like, all he wanted to do was go back to the old days and like, because of his current days, he wasn't happy with them. Like he was still living back in the high school days when he played football. And so while I was thinking about that, I remembered this quote from The Office, and I could have swore I was like, that must have been like an old famous quote, but I can't find anywhere else. So I think I'm sure somebody has said it before, but like the popularity of the quote, and he was, I forget the character's name in the show, but he said, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you left them. And, you know, that kind of sparked a whole nother thought process for me. And I was thinking, if I think about graffiti, and I might think the good old days for me would be like, I don't know, 93 to 98, something like that. Those were like really the peak sort of years where I was like bombing and doing this, all the, you know, the illegal stuff that I really wish I could be doing right now, but I'm 50. I don't know. No excuses, but you know how it is. Own a business and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, that's where my heart's at is that stuff, like on the streets and in the train yards and shit like that. And so, you know, if I was thinking about graffiti, I would probably think that those were the good old days, you know, that sort of era, those few years. Obviously, like I painted more, you know, outside of those times, but those were the times when, you know, I was young and like everything. Like 93, I got an MSK and like it was really active, and, you know, we were building this thing up. And I guess that kind of leads me into this concept that I've talked about before. It's like the true happiness is in the journey. And so if you look at MSK now, you might think like, oh, it's this big crew, it's worldwide, like very well known and all this kind of shit. But if you were around in 93, it wasn't like that at the time. So we were in the process of building. So not only was it like sort of the heyday of graffiti for me and the type of graffiti that I wanted to do, but I was also contributing to building this thing that, although it had been around, it was really coming back up, 92, 93. And most people didn't know about it. So it was mainly like a new crew on the scene. So as our reputation started to grow throughout the 90s, you know, that was exciting. And it was, you know, a really good example of the happiness is in the process, you know? And so as I'm thinking about this stuff, I'm thinking about, you know, different ideas and different concepts, like, you know, my best days are always ahead of me and stuff like that. And then I was thinking about my life, and I was just like, you know, I'm probably in the good old days again right now, you know, because like I'm with Jessie and she's like the best partner I could ever ask for. And, you know, although my business is causing probably the most, well, not probably, it's absolutely causing the most amount of stress that I've ever experienced. This is the shit that I was talking about in the last episode. It's like, these are the hurdles that obviously not my relationship. I'm talking about just my business. These are the hardships that you have to overcome and the stress that you have to overcome to achieve what you want to achieve. And that is, I believe that's where true happiness comes from, is by overcoming these things. And so as I'm thinking about all this, I'm thinking about like my team and, you know, getting established in Vegas and all this stuff. And I was thinking, you know, maybe I'm in the good old days right now. And, you know, someday down the line, I'm going to look back on these days and think about them in a similar way as I was thinking about my graffiti in the 90s. And maybe even, you know, who knows like what's going to happen, but maybe even like some sort of graffiti type stuff that happens in the current years is something that I'm going to look back on in the same way. You know, like I can look at other aspects of my life, and there's definitely eras where I look back and I was like, nah, wasn't really in a good place. And I don't really see those as the good old days, you know, but there is some stuff that I look back on those days and reminisce, like in a sense, like, you know, there's some stuff that was exciting. Like I started Machine in 2002 as a motion graphics company, and I wasn't in a good place for I don't know, a good decade or more. I don't know. Wasn't in a very good place. So I don't really look back on those times very fondly. But anyway, the point is, you know, the more I think about that and the more I kind of wonder about what kind of control we have over whether or not these days are the good old days. So I believe that, there's lots of examples. If I talk about Stoic philosophy a lot, and Epictetus is a great example of that, of this idea that maybe. So this was thousands of years ago. Epictetus spent the first good part of his life as a slave, but he still was able to cultivate this kind of Stoic philosophy and these sort of ideas that, even though he's not physically free, nobody can control his mind, and nobody can really take the freedom away from his mind. And so he was able to find well, I'm assuming this, obviously, there's not a whole lot of, I don't know if I have this right, but I don't think he actually wrote anything. I think well, I know he didn't write the Enchiridion, which is one of the most famous things from his discourses. It was his student Arian or Arian, I don't know how to say it, but he's the one that wrote all the shit down that he learned from the lessons. So it was his words, but anyway, that's not really the point. But he was able to cultivate this kind of inner peace, even though he was a slave. And that's obviously way worse than anything that I've experienced or any level of stress that I can experience. So thinking about stuff like that, and it's like, how much control do I actually have over how I'm going to look back on this time? And so if I'm sitting here stressed out all the time, maybe when I do look back on this time, I won't look back on it as fondly as maybe when I look back on the mid 90s, it's like, so I don't know. I'm actually thinking of more stuff as I'm talking, so it's kind of tripping me up a little bit, but I guess the overall idea is like, we have the control to make the days the good old days. And so if we're not doing the things that we're supposed to do, and in my situation, I think I can create a more memorable experience by doing all of the things that I know I need to be doing. I need to be in the physical shape that I know I should be in. I should be setting the example that I know I should be setting. I should be doing the certain things in my business that I know are going to move the business forward and achieve our goals. And I'm obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm doing all of those things. I'm not there, but I am taking the steps to make those things happen. And then on a little side thing, I heard something on another podcast. I can't remember which one, but it was really interesting. And the guy was talking about how, if you do the same things over and over again, then all of those sort of blend together. So like, for example, if you take the same route to work every day, your mind kind of creates just sort of one memory of you maybe not one, but just sort of mixes all these memories together. If nothing happens during that route. So let's say you drive to work 100 times and it's the same shit every single time. If you ever think back on it, you're most likely going to be thinking back on a mix of all of these different times that you drove that route. But if you take a different street, or if you do a turn that you never did, or, something detours you, or you see an accident or something like that, that actually creates a memory in your mind. And then, so it's like, I started doing this, and I started mixing things up in my life where I'm taking different routes to work, or like I'm doing things just slightly different so that those memories don't all kind of mix together. And I thought about like, and it kind of bummed me out a little bit, because like Jesse and I have like these routines that I don't know what to call them routines, but like, I guess that's what it is. Like on Sundays, like we go to the same coffee shop, and so I wonder if I think back on those times, that how many of those are all just mashed together as, there was like 10 different days that I'm just sort of remembering, because it's just repeating over and over again, even though we kind of talk about the same stuff, but it's like, it's the same thing all the time. So I'm trying to look out for ways to, just try to mix things up a little bit. And it could be all these different things. And I'm finding it's pretty effective, because when I think back on, we normally do this, and I did this, I remember that time, versus, when you do things the same way every time. I don't know. kind of losing track of myself. But the other thing that got me thinking about is also, they say like as you get older, the time goes by faster. And I feel like I've experienced that. Like I have this memory from when I was a kid, and I think it was like summer break between like first and second grade or something like that. And I just have this memory of riding my bike up to this school that we used to kind of ride our bikes around in the parking lot. And I remember thinking like, we've been on summer break forever. And like, we have so much longer to go. And I think summer breaks, like 3 months or something. Like now 3 months goes by so fucking fast. Like it just turned 2024 and we're already in the second quarter of the year. So I think that's related. I think like as you get older, you settle into more and more routines. And so the more routines that you settle into, the more all of these memories kind of mash together. And so I think that actually causes time to sort of condense in your mind. You know, it feels like it went by really fast. So like the example of you went to work the same route 100 times. What if in your mind, like how it feels like that's only one time, like it condenses all into one? I don't know if I'm kind of getting out of control here, but I don't know. It just got me thinking, and it's gotten me being more intentional about wanting to create more memories. And so it all sort of relates together. If you think about, you know, how do you create the good old days in the time that you're in now, even if you're not exactly where you want to be, or things are hard, or, you know, whatever is going on. In my mind, there's a few ways, like obviously what I just talked about is sort of mixing things up and trying to create new experiences, even if they're not like these crazy big things, like just simply going a different route, or just taking a turn down a street you've never been on and just sort of see where that goes. I've been doing that a little bit here in Vegas just to kind of learn my way around. I'm like, what if I turn here? Will I be able to find my way home? You know, I did that just yesterday, actually. And so I wonder if that kind of contributes to obviously making the day more memorable, even if it's not really that big of a deal. Like maybe it'll extend sort of how you perceive that time. But then also being intentional about being happy about where you're at, and sort of with the things that I was talking about in the last episode, like even if you're going through a tough time in your life, just know that once you overcome that, that's like another, you know, bit of armor that you've built up for yourself. So if there's a way to find some sort of happiness and some sort of like satisfaction in the fact that, you know, you're in something that you're going to overcome, and that's going to create some sort of happiness for you down the line. So at the end of the day, I think the overall message is just, you know, I think it's cool to reminisce about the good old days, but I also think it's, at least for me, like I would be sort of bummed out if I was looking back at the good old days and wishing that I was back there, because that to me would tell me that I'm not happy with what I'm currently doing. And right now is where we're at. This is the life we're living right now. So it's cool to have those things, but like, what are you doing to make right now the good old days? All right. Good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And yeah, stay up.